in the small, mist-covered town of Alderwood. The fog crept in from the forest as if it carried secrets from the beyond. Those who dared to venture into the woods at night whispered about seeing a figure there. A man who spoke only in murmurs, yet his voice carried chilling tales of spirits caught between worlds. They called him Asterisk the Whisperer Asterisk. No one knew his true name, and he was rarely seen outside the woods. But whenever he did emerge, he left behind a string of strange, unexplainable occurrences. People would find cryptic symbols drawn on their doors, icy handprints on their windows, and the sense that something was watching them in the dead of night. He'd tell his ghost stories in hushed tones, his voice barely louder than the rustle of the wind. One night, a group of brave but curious townsfolk decided to follow him into the woods. They trailed his eerie path, catching glimpses of his shadow as he glided deeper into the mist, his figure slowly merging with the haze. Then, he stopped in a clearing, where his face caught the dim light of the crescent moon, revealing hollow eyes that seemed to hold decades, centuries, even of pain and sorrow. "Tonight," he whispered, "I'll tell you about Asterisk the Grey Lady Asterisk." The whisperer began to recount the tale of a once beautiful woman, who wandered the woods in a gown of pale gray, her face hidden beneath a delicate veil. She had been cursed to roam the forest after her untimely death, a spirit searching for her lost love. The whisperer's voice grew softer as he described how she lured lost souls to join her in eternal sorrow. As he spoke, the townsfolk noticed a shift in the air. The trees creaked, and a strange chill settled over them. They looked around uneasily, and one by one, each person's gaze fell on a faint figure in the distance, a woman, dressed in flowing gray, her face obscured by a veil. "She comes for the lonely," the whisperer murmured. "But beware, once you see her, she's already chosen you." When the townsfolk looked back to question him, the whisperer was gone. Only his voice echoed faintly in the night, trailing off as if carried away by the wind. Those who had seen Asterisk the Grey Lady Asterisk claimed they could still feel her presence, watching from the shadows, waiting for the moment they would be alone. And to this day, in Alderwood, when someone vanishes without a trace, the villagers say it was the Grey Lady who took them, bound to her by the whisperer's tale, a tale that has no ending. Months passed after that chilling night, and whispers of the Grey Lady filled the air. Some townsfolk who had seen her grew restless, plagued by strange dreams of the misty forest. They'd wake up gasping, feeling the weight of her gaze on them, yet each time they spoke of her, their memories of that night grew foggier. Soon, a feeling of dread settled over Alderwood, as if a part of the forest had bled into the town itself. One evening, Ethan, a young man who had been among the group that night, stumbled upon an old diary in his late grandmother's attic. The leather-bound book was brittle with age, filled with notes about Alderwood's history, the supernatural folklore that ran through its veins, and, to his shock, the whisperer, the diary revealed something astonishing. The whisperer had appeared in Alderwood before, nearly a century ago, under the same circumstances. Every few decades, he'd surface from the shadows, luring people into his chilling stories, always with one specific ghost, Asterisk the Grey Lady Asterisk. It seemed that each generation suffered the same fate. Those who listened to his tale were haunted, one by one disappearing, as if they'd been marked. Desperate to break the curse, Ethan sought the help of Rosalind, an old woman who had been a healer in Alderwood for as long as anyone could remember. She told him a truth even more disturbing. The Grey Lady was no ordinary spirit. She had once been a powerful medium, a woman who crossed the line between the living and the dead for her love. Her tragic story had bound her to the forest, trapped in a realm where she could only find solace by drawing others into her sorrow. The whisperer was her tether, a twisted guide who ensured she'd never be alone in her suffering. "There's only one way to end this," Rosalind said, her voice a hushed, fearful whisper. "You must find the whisperer and sever his connection to her. But to do that, you'll have to lure him out, confront him in the forest, and offer him something even he can't refuse." Ethan's heart raced as he realized what she meant. In Alderwood, there was only one thing the whisperer sought above all else: a new story to tell, a story of his own making. Rosalind handed him a small, rusted amulet and warned him, "Be careful, Ethan. Once you've seen the Grey Lady, There's no turning back. The forest remembers, and it never lets go. That night, Ethan ventured alone into the woods, the amulet in hand, feeling the weight of the Grey Lady's gaze already upon him. The trees loomed like silent witnesses, watching as he walked deeper, whispering her name. And somewhere in the dark, the whisperer waited, ready to listen. Ethan moved deeper into the woods, the mist growing thicker around him, swallowing sound and light until he could barely see his own hands. Each step felt heavier, as if the forest itself were trying to keep him there, to pull him down into its damp earth. Then, out of the silence, a voice drifted to him faint, like a whisper in the breeze. "Ethan, you've come to me?" He froze, recognizing the sorrow-laden tone of the Grey Lady. Her figure materialized just beyond the trees, her veil fluttering, obscuring her face in the dim light. Ethan clutched the amulet, feeling a surge of courage. "Show yourself," he called, his voice trembling. "I know who you are and I know what's keeping you here." The Grey Lady paused, her ghostly form hovering, watching him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. But then, another presence stirred in the shadows, a tall figure with hollow eyes and a thin, knowing smile. Asterisk the whisperer asterisk had come. "You brought me a story," he said, his voice curling through the air like smoke. "But not just any story. One you've woven with your own fear and curiosity. I wonder will you dare to finish it?" Ethan could feel the chill radiating from him, a cold that sank past flesh and into bone. But he steeled himself, focusing on the amulet. He knew it was his only shield, the key to severing the whisperer's hold on the Grey Lady. "What if I tell the story instead?" Ethan challenged, his voice growing stronger. "What if I break the curse by giving her a new fate?" The whisperer tilted his head, intrigued, but his expression darkened, and with a low murmur, he said, "Stories can't be undone so easily. She's bound by her sorrow, trapped by a love that slipped through time. The moment you walked into this forest, you became part of her tale. And once a tale is woven, there's no escape." The Grey Lady's gaze shifted, as if awakening to something, a glimmer of hope perhaps, or the faint memory of love lost. She reached out a hand, her fingers nearly brushing Ethan's. "If you free me," she whispered, "there will be a price." In the stillness, Ethan realized he was standing on the very edge of life and death, caught between the world of the living and the mournful domain of the spirits. He knew he had to make a choice, offer his life to complete the whisperer's tale, or find a way to rewrite the ending entirely. He took a breath, his fingers tightening around the amulet, and spoke softly to the Grey Lady, his words trembling with resolve. "Then let's make a new ending, one where you walk free." The whisperer's face contorted with fury, his grip on the forest shadows growing tighter, as the trees seemed to bend toward Ethan. But as he raised the amulet, a strange light began to pulse from it, casting the shadows away, slicing through the mist and reaching toward the Grey Lady. The whisperer let out a shriek that echoed through the woods as he began to fade, his form twisting into the shadows. "No," he cried. "You can't rewrite what's already written." As the whisperer vanished into the depths of the forest, his words lingered, woven into the very fabric of the trees. But Ethan knew it wasn't over. The amulet had only begun to unlock the forest's secrets, the tales it guarded, and though the whisperer was gone, the forest still carried his voice, whispering Ethan's name into the night. Ethan stumbled back toward town, knowing his battle wasn't truly over. Somewhere in Alderwood, the curse waited, watching, biding its time until the moment it would claim another victim. And Ethan, bound to its story, could feel it watching him, waiting for him to return. As Ethan returned to Alderwood, a warmth began to pulse from the amulet, pushing back the chill of the forest. He felt lighter, as if a heavy weight had finally lifted. The Grey Lady's sorrowful gaze lingered in his mind, but now he sensed a gentleness, a gratitude that hadn't been there before. He knew that, somehow, she was finally at peace. Rosalind met him on the edge of town, her face breaking into a relieved smile when she saw him. She could tell from the glow in his eyes and the steady grip of the amulet that he had succeeded. "The whisperer is gone," she whispered, almost in disbelief. "The Grey Lady is free." In the days that followed, the fog that had haunted Alderwood began to clear, revealing the forest in a new light. No longer did the trees seem to twist with malice. Instead, They stood tall and still, protectors of a quiet peace. Stories of eerie voices and vanishing townsfolk faded into distant memories, leaving Alderwood to bask in an unfamiliar sense of calm. One evening, as Ethan walked through the forest alone, he felt a gentle breeze brush past him, and a soft voice drifted through the trees. "Thank you," it whispered, barely more than a sigh. Ethan turned, seeing a faint shimmer of light where the gray lady once stood, her veil lifted and her face calm and radiant, no longer bound by sorrow. With a quiet smile, Ethan bowed his head, sensing her spirit finally moving on. He slipped the amulet into his pocket, a small reminder of the journey that had brought him to this moment of peace. As he made his way back to town, the last rays of twilight painted the forest in golden hues, and Alderwood stood calm and safe, freed from its haunting curse. And from that day forward, the townsfolk spoke of Ethan not with fear, but with admiration. They saw him as the young man who had brought light back to Alderwood, freeing them all from the grip of the past. And though the forest held its mysteries, it was no longer a place of dread, but a quiet reminder that even the darkest tales could find their own endings.